Good morning, everyone. I'm Anthony Mingy, Senior Partner with Fitch & Associates, and on behalf of the firm, I want to welcome you all to the first in our Pinnacle webinar series. I hope this morning finds you all safe and well. It's my honor to get this year's Pinnacle webinar series started, but you didn't come here to hear me, so I'll be brief. As you all probably know by now, due to COVID-19, we have opted to postpone the 15th Annual Pinnacle Leadership Conference. The conference will now take place August 9th through 13, 2021, and will be at the same planned location, the JW Marriott Desert Ridge in Phoenix, Arizona. We hope to see you there. Postponing Pinnacle was a difficult decision, and we wanted to ensure that our registrants and the industry continued to receive the same high-quality content they've come to expect from the conference. In that regard, we've expanded our popular webinar series to bring you more sessions from now until we see each other again in 2021. The Pinnacle webinar series is a benefit brought to you by our strategic partners, platinum level sponsors, and our education sponsor, Ninth Brain. Safety and wellness are always on our minds in EMS, but never more so than now. And the required social distancing added into the mix, we now find ourselves in uncharted territory. It's easy to feel isolated and alone out there, but you don't have to be. You're in for a treat today with a very timely topic presented by a man we all know and love, Mr. Mike Taigman. Today's webinar is sponsored and presented by our strategic partner, FirstWatch. FirstWatch has been a leader in EMS for over 20 years and has been with Pinnacle since the very beginning. We're very proud of the work they do in and for the industry and grateful for their long-standing support of Pinnacle. It's my privilege to introduce FirstWatch founder and president, Todd Stout, to kick off this webinar. Todd?
Hi, folks. It's Todd Stout. I'm proud to be here. I'm just going to be even more brief, and I'm going to hand this over to my buddy Mike, who's going to take it away.
Good morning, everybody. This is me. And so this topic today is about staying connected in a physically distant world, and it is our lives have been upended, as everybody on here has experienced in various ways. And a couple of different things came to mind as I started putting this topic together. And one is there's a study, and I apologize for the sexist nature of this study. It's referred to as the Harvard Men's Study, also known as the Grant Study. And this was they in the 1940s, when Harvard was an all men's school. That's why it's a sexist study to start with. They identified several hundred Harvard freshmen and young men of the same age in communities around Harvard that had a little more economic challenges in their lives, and they went and did really detailed interviews of these folks. They also did full health assessments, drew blood to look at health-related indicators and those kinds of things, and just put together a comprehensive package of their goals and their level of happiness and their mental health status, their physical health status, and had a really comprehensive look. And then they went back 2 years later to the same group and did exactly the same assessment, and then did it 2 years later, and then did it 2 years later, and then did it 2 years later, and have been doing it for close to 70 years at this point in time. So of the original participants, there are about, I think there's 40 or so that are still alive, all in their 90s at this point in time. So they have accumulated tens of thousands of pages worth of data and information on these folks over the course of the years. And so they really have been able to do a really detailed analysis and assessment about what has contributed to longevity, what has contributed to health or taken away health, and what has contributed to happiness and satisfaction in life. And it's fascinating. It turns out that your hemoglobin A1C, your cholesterol, and your blood pressure are not the biggest contributors. Neither is the amount of money in your bank account or the degree you actually got from Harvard or the job you got afterwards. Head and shoulders above everything else is the quality of your relationships in life. And that the higher quality your relationships are, the better health you have, the faster you recover from illness when you get it, the happier you are, the more successful you are, all the way around. So connection and relationships are vitally important to our health and mental health and success in the world. And as I was thinking about relationships, of course, when you do a talk on relationships, you start kind of thinking over the relationships in your life. And I was actually reminiscing about my first marriage. And that was a very long time ago. But I was young. I was 20, and my first wife was 18 at the time, and we started having challenges in our relationship shortly after we got married. And one night she had gone out with friends, and she ended up staying out all night until 5 o'clock in the morning, and she came home just to say goodbye to me before I went to work my day shift at the Denver Paramedic Division. And she had some issues with addiction, and we got her into a treatment program. And part of the treatment program is each person in the couple had their own psychologist that they talked to, and group therapy and those kinds of things. So this is my very first experience with therapy of any kind. And my therapist, Jack, was not have you lay on the couch and sit in the chair stroking his beard, smoking a pipe kind of therapist. We walked for an hour in a local park, and during one of our sessions, I was describing to him this dynamic where she had stayed out all night and come home at 5 a.m. and I kind of told him the story, and he said, "Wow," he said, "How'd that make you feel?" And I said, well, she came home to say goodbye, and I don't think she got any particular trouble and all that kind of stuff. And he said, "Oh, that's interesting. How did that make you feel?" And I said, "Well, she's pretty young, and she kind of moved out of the house with her parents into living with me, and has never really had a chance to sow her wild oats and all that kind of stuff." And he grabbed me by the arm, spun me around, got right in my face, and he said, "I ask you how that made you feel." And I said, "I guess I don't understand your question," which was a clue that I had a challenge. And the challenge, the psychological diagnosis that you would call it would be alexithymia. And A stands for without, lex is for lexicon or word, and thymia is for emotion. And when it comes to connection, the experience of feeling connected to other people in the world is very much about your emotion. And I believe that if you're not connected with your own emotions, that it's really hard to feel that connection with other folks, whether you're physically distanced or sitting right next to them. So I spent a chunk of time in my therapy sessions with Jack reconnecting with my emotions so that I could experience them in the moment. And this alexithymia thing, I came by it honestly. I was a paramedic, like many folks on this call. I see a whole bunch of longtime friends and familiar names in the list. I would start doing shout outs, but that would take 15 minutes worth of the presentation. So I'm grateful for you all being here. But when I went to EMT and paramedic school in the 70s, and this is the textbook we used back then. It was Nancy Caroline's Emergency Care in the Streets. While I was going to EMT and paramedic school, and I was, overtly learning about how to read EKGs and how to differentiate pulmonary edema from asthma, from congestive heart failure, and all of those kinds of medical things at a subtle cultural level, I was learning to distance myself from my emotions. And this is a tool medics need. It's like, if you're have fallen off your bicycle and snapped your femur in half, the natural, normal human response is, oh my God, that looks terrible. Oh my God, that must hurt so much. You don't want your paramedic responding like that. You want your paramedic to be cool and say, hi, I'm Cindy. I'll be your paramedic. That looks like it hurts a lot. I'm gonna get you something for the pain and take care of it. You want somebody who's cool and calm. So you learn that in order to function in our world, you need to distance yourself from your emotions a little bit. So I'm going to ask you a question here. What do rubber gloves, helmets, condoms, seat belts, and soft body armor all have in common? Well, they're and you can jump into the there you go. Thanks for jumping in on the chat here. I appreciate that. A lot of you are saying, yeah, they're all for protection, right? They are all barriers that are designed to protect you from some kind of harm or situation. And your emotional shield, that shield that allows you to be cool and calm and professional when you're dealing with patients, is something that is very similar. It is like an emotional body armor or emotional seatbelt or rubber glove that protects you in the moment. And I, unfortunately, you don't have cameras on today. I cannot see you, so I don't know how many of you are wearing condoms right now or have on your motorcycle helmets full face with a face shield down, or are wearing soft body armor as you're listening to this talk. Some of you might be, but chances are most of you are not. And some safety freaks would say, my God, you should always have your helmet on, because you never know when you might be in a situation where your head might be injured, and that that's just not realistic. In reality, we use these devices, these technologies, when we're involved in a situation where we're at risk and that requires some extra level of protection. And the emotional shield in our lives is similar. It is something we can put on when we need it in order to take care of a patient or something like that. But the thing they never taught us when we were in school is that it's something you can take off and be able to take it off when you're at home with your family, when you're not engaged in your work life, and realize that it's a tool from that perspective. And I think there's a large group of us in our profession that really need to learn this particular skill. Because when we talk about staying connected with folks, the aspects of staying connected are really empathy and compassion. And it's interesting that the word empathy comes from the Greek root word empathia, which means to feel into. And it's your ability to notice how someone else is feeling from an emotional perspective. And when we're together with people live, there are a couple of things that we use in order to do this effectively. One is called motor mimicry, and you can try this right now. We can do this together in all of our various places, wherever you happen to be in the country. What I want you to do is push your chair back from whatever device you're looking at here, and look down at the floor and hunch your shoulders forward and breathe really shallow, and then say out loud to yourself, I feel fantastic. And chances are that seemed incongruous, right? So sit up, take a deep breath, bring your chest up in the room, bring your eyes up, and look out into the room, and take a full deep breath and say, I feel so sad. And chances are that doesn't quite fit either. And our emotions are worn in our facial expressions and our body posture. And when we're connecting with somebody else from an empathic level, the way it works is we do a little bit of subtle mimicry of how the other person is feeling, and that gets fed through our own nervous system so that we have an emotional experience, and that allows us to recognize the emotion in someone else. And Anthony Newell said, make sure no one is keying the microphone when you're saying that out loud. For those of you that are on duty, that's good advice. The next strategy that is used to connect with somebody else empathically is called entrainment. And entrainment has to do with rhythms. And many of our emotions are manifest in rhythms like our rate of breathing, our rate of eye blinking, the rate we might tap our foot. Those are all kind of manifestations of rhythms. And when we kind of line up rhythms, it's interesting how we tend to match things in the world. One of my favorite examples of this is when they do a heart transplant. That's called a piggyback heart transplant. It's for somebody whose heart is failing and they need a transplant, but the donor heart that they find is not big enough to circulate for their entire body. So they'll put the person on a heart-lung machine, and they will wire basically pipe the second heart in so that both hearts are in the chest, and they'll defibrillate both hearts at the same time. And when they start beating, they'll start beating initially at their own natural rates, which are different rates. And over the course of about 15 minutes, they will line up automatically to beat together at the same rate for most of the patient's life. It is a fascinating dynamic. So that matching of neurons allows people to connect empathically, and the next level of connection from empathy is compassion, where you reach out to someone else to, if you recognize suffering in someone else, compassion is the action, the desire and the action to ease or relieve someone else's suffering. And there's a few different ways to go about doing that. And Holly mentioned that mirror neurons are a fascinating development in terms of communication, and there's a whole series of study around that is wonderful in my estimation. So when you think about different health and risk factors in the world, when it comes to coronary artery disease and stroke disease, there is something that is a higher risk factor than obesity or smoking, and that is loneliness. And there's a lot of good science that says that loneliness really is a huge risk factor for physical health as well as psychological and mental health. And when you combine loneliness with isolation, like we have in physical distancing, that can lead to hopelessness, anger, depression. There's a significant risk of suicide rates increasing as we deal with things in our world. And with this world where this way of connecting is not allowed, we switched for a while. I wrote an article on elbow bumps or the new handshake because that was theorized to be safer, and we quickly learned that was way too close, so you can't do that anymore. So now, even we're in grocery stores and whatnot, this need to stay at least 6 feet back. And if somebody coughs or sneezes without a mask, you probably need to be 26 feet back, not 6 feet back. So our greetings and connections are more the, hand over the heart and bow from a long distance away. So when it comes to connecting in this distance world, there's a few principles about feeling secure and feeling connected in your relationships with other people that are helpful. And these come from Dan Siegel, physician, chief of psychiatry at UCLA, and director of the Mindsight Institute. And he says that people need to be seen, and it's easy when you're on on Zoom sessions and whatnot to be distracted in answering your emails or whatever it is you're doing, and having a hard time making eye contact. Some of us have cameras on our computers that are located different than where the person is we're looking at, and so I'll find myself, you know, making what feels like eye contact to me, but to them it looks like I'm looking down from them on the computer. So spending a little bit of attention to making eye contact that somebody else can feel and you can feel, helping people feel safe, and a lot of that is about dialing down and helping soothe them when they're stressed. So this kind of recipe for seen, safe, and soothed equals people feeling secure in general and secure in their connection. And if you're a parent who's got kids at home during this time, you know, they're absolutely feeling the stress of this kind of thing, and this ability to have a secure connection is really important. And kids, they manifest their stress and show their stress in different ways. May ask for more help because their Lego isn't working correctly, or you know, ask you questions about how you're doing and how you're feeling, and just be attuned to really subtle signs of stress and potential disconnection in your kids. And using this recipe is a key strategy around that. Another trick you can do when you're connecting with people over the net, or those of you who are out working on the streets during this pandemic, which thank God you're willing to do that, because all the rest of the world is depending on you. You know, you've got your full personal protective equipment on. You've got, you know, goggles and a mask and a face shield and a gown and triple gloves or a hazmat suit, or, you know, whatever level of PPE is available to you. And a lot of the things that we used to do to kind of comfort and connect with patients are not available. So our eyes and eye contact really is the kind of what's left from the ability to connect. And one of the tricks is if you can make it a habit to identify the eye color of every patient you interact with. And for those of you who are you know, working in jobs where you're more remote and you're doing Zoom sessions or WebEx or GoToMeeting or BlueJean or whatever it is your technology, FaceTime kind of sessions, take the time to see if you can try to find the eye color of the other person. And Brooke just mentioned something a lot of physicians and nurses are doing in New York, where they're putting a picture of themselves on the outside of their gown, so patients can actually know that it's a human being and what they look like behind that, which is a really important part of empathy. You know, another dynamic around relationships in this world is that when people are stressed, really minor things can set them off and have them feel like they've been slighted, or you've been rude or inconsiderate or whatever, because, you know, it's like when you stub your toe once, the second time you stub your toe, it hurts so much more because your nervous system is all primed and activated from that initial pain. Well, all across the world, our nervous systems are collectively activated and stressed, so it takes much less social slight or any of those kinds of things to set people off. So just be really attuned to that, and I really encourage you to give the people in your world a big pass when they're upset with you, or you're in arguments with them on Facebook or any of those kinds of things. And make sure when you notice any little rupture in relationships, just reach out and connect and apologize and repair. So one of the things that's kind of magical about the way our brains and our minds work is our limbic system, which is the seat of all of our emotions in the world, has really an open loop nature. Our limbic system is it's relational. It has impacts on other folks and other folks' limbic systems impact you. It's not just contained inside your brain. It's in relationship and in community. And, you know, if any of you have ever been in a meeting and had one person yawn and watch how that yawn gets contagious and passed around the room, that's kind of a tangible manifestation of the open loop nature of our limbic system. And just like coronavirus can be passed from one person to many, we have a really contagious nature of our emotions. The folks, Dr. Perry from Houston, who's one of the world's leading experts in stress, particularly in children, refers to them as emotional contagions. And it has a big impact, and if you're a parent, your emotions have a bigger impact on your kids than their emotions do on each other. And if you're in a leadership position in an organization, your emotions are more contagious and have a much bigger impact on your team than you might expect and give it credit for. And this contagion is the strategy that allows parents to comfort an upset child. Just being present with them and helping them kind of dial their emotional response down is really a form of interpersonal limbic regulation. And the science around this is fascinating. The neuroscience has shown that just being in the presence of someone else and connecting with them, you can actually alter hormone levels in another person. You can change their cardiovascular function, their ejection fraction, their cardiac output. You can have an impact on their sleep rhythms and the depth of their sleep when they sleep later, and their body's immunologic functions. It is fascinating to think about that. So when I was putting this talk together and started thinking about, you know, who do I know that's really good about staying connected and helping people feel connected when, you know, you're not with them personally. So some of you remember Tom Dick, who used to write Tricks of the Trade for Gems Magazine. I see several people on this thread that are old enough to remember Tom Dick's articles. Yeah, Bill and Skip, I'm talking about you. And Mike too. He's an amazing guy, and Walt, yes. And Tom wrote the book People Care, which if you haven't read it, you know, use your physical distancing time to read this book. I strongly encourage it. It is brilliantly done, particularly the third edition, the one that just came out. But I called Tom yesterday, and we spent an hour and a half on the phone, and we chat every couple of weeks. And I said, you know, Tom, I'm gonna be talking to a bunch of people tomorrow about staying connected at a distance. I said, what advice do you have for them? And without hesitation, he said, just call 5 people a day, every day, for no reason, and then say hi, and then maybe ask a question, and then shut up and just listen. And I think that is rock solid advice. And you know, in the perspective of your interpersonal limbic system, and knowing that your emotions connect with other folks, one of the things I encourage you to do just before you make the call is do 4 rounds of what the folks in the military and law enforcement call tactical breathing. The Buddhists call it just meditative breathing. But you know, it can be thought of as a square like this, where you take a breath in for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, blow it out for 4 seconds, and then take it in for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, blow it out for 4 seconds, hold the blowout for 4 seconds, and then take it in for 4 seconds. You can do this right now if you're so inspired. And this has been shown to really effectively dial down your sympathetic nervous system response. It inspires the release of oxytocin, what's also known as the love hormone, which increases your connection just before you call. And we got a question here about a link to tactical breathing, and actually the best book on this is called On Combat, which is a very hardcore kind of law enforcement book. It's interesting. I see Joyce Wheeler is saying no last slide, but appreciate that too. Okay. And I'll give you my email address at the end of this, and any of you who want references about any of the science around this, I am more than happy to share any of that stuff with you. But in thinking about today's talk, I thought, let's look for a good set of questions that you could use if you're going to call somebody like Tom does. So I went to the Greater Good magazine, and this is a partnership with UC Berkeley and UCSF, and it is science-based insights for a meaningful life. And they had a list of questions to use to start a deep, meaningful, and connected conversation. So this is where I love and I really appreciate all of you that have been participating in the chat. And this is what I'd love for everybody to do, is to just jump on here and answer these questions. We'll go through a few of them and answer them for yourself here. If you were given the choice of anyone in the world you would like to have dinner with as soon as your COVID crisis is over, please type it into the chat, and maybe just say a little something about why that person would be somebody that you'd like to have dinner with. If you were going to connect and think for a minute, who would you want as a dinner guest? My best friend, other family members, Walt. Jim Page again. Jim Page certainly would be on my list. My mom, Mike Taigman. Yes, Brooke, you and I have had several meals together, and I would love to do that. Tiger Woods, Elon Musk, who's a disruptive innovation from Tesla. Your parents, people who kept his enthusiasm into the 80s. Frank Baring, Jack Stout. Absolutely. I've had some amazing dinners with Jack Stout over the years, and would absolutely put that on the list. David Nelson. This is great, and it's fun to think about this and do this. This is wonderful. My sister Sue, who's on here, said her stepsons, and one of the things that those of you, particularly working in the field, since my sister is on this call, I thought I would give her a shout out. She is a world-class consultant, has worked with Fortune 100 companies all over the world, helping them with leadership and their teams and building connections. And she and her colleagues at Veris Global, their consulting team, have this concept called Homeward Bound, where they talk about how so many times our jobs are so demanding, and when you get home, it's like you're exhausted, and behind the doors of your house are the people that matter most to you in the world. She taught this to me like 5 or 6 years ago, and she said, you should save your best for the people you love the most. And I said, that's an interesting concept. I realized I hadn't been doing that. So I started pausing in my driveway before I came in the house, and I'd ask myself, what did I learn today? What's something I feel good about? And how can I be the best father and husband and partner for the people inside my house here when I walk in the door, and really kind of ground myself in that before coming in. And I'm writing a book on stress management, and when I was writing that section of the book, my wife said, "I didn't know you'd learn that technique. It's been 5 years since we've had one of those coming home arguments. You've really been doing that? That really works." So thank you, Sue, for planning that. It's pretty impressive. So I'm gonna slip to the next question. I love the answers to this, and we'll maybe what we'll do is we'll grab this entire chat here, and maybe we'll put together an article collaborating your thoughts on how to stay connected. What would constitute a perfect day for you? How would you describe a perfect day for you? What does that look like? And it can be a perfect day, and no family, no work, spending time outside, healthy with a smile from your wife. Thank you, John. Doing some exploration and adventure with your kids. Brooke, looking at your Facebook posts, you live that to the fullest when it's non-COVID time. Skip would be at the beach in Hawaii with his wife. Carissa, time with kids. Walt, up early, great food and fun. It's just, one of the things about these conversation starters, at least for me, it's just thinking about the answer makes me feel good and makes me feel more connected to the world. Congruent with self, enjoying each moment, welcoming all moments as gifts, collecting rocks in the desert, a cup of coffee, a walk in the woods, fishing up north. I love these answers. A motorcycle ride on the Harley. Yes, Dave, I appreciate that one. I used to refer to it as helmet therapy time because it's hard to think about any of the troubles in the world when you're on your bike. Spending time with family and kids. That's wonderful. I'm going to jump on to the next one. What do you feel most grateful for in the world in your life? And right now for me, I feel most grateful for all of you and the lifelong friendships many of us have had, the work that you all do in the world, whether it's, there's a lot of educators on this call, a lot of people I've learned a whole lot from, and people that have been mentors of mine. I'm really grateful for those of you that are working on the front line and continuing to take care of people, even though it puts your own health and your own life at risk. I'm grateful for work right now, having a reliable income stream so your family's cared for. That's huge. Trusting relationships, health. Holly said kindness, and if you knew her, you'd realize she's one of the kindest people on the planet. Waking up every day with a roof over my head and food in the belly. Being blessed to have family and friends. Having Jeff Boss, let's see here, grateful for a career helping people for over 40 years. Michael, you're in good company. There are a lot of people on this call north of 40 years in this profession. Ability to comfort your son and who's confused about what's going on. That's key. Let's grab the next one. What is it you value most in friendship? What is it that you value most in friendship? And this is a particularly fun question for me. I have so many friends on this call, new friends. Bobby from the EMS survey team is on, and I've been spending a lot of time on Zoom sessions with him over the last couple of months, and have really grown to appreciate him, and Mike Grill and Brooks and Skip and Bill Toon, even though Bill thinks I'm good looking, which I'm a little concerned about, but not really. Chris Carlson, who he and I have worked together for 30 years, there's a lot of amazing folks on here, and I have a deep value for people who are able to be real and really talk about things that matter and connect. And I am grateful for so many of you on this call that I've had the opportunity to have those one-on-one conversations with, and for those of you who I haven't yet, hopefully I will have that opportunity. We'll have that opportunity in the future to have a connection and talk about things that matter. And so the next question is, you know, when did you last cry by yourself? When was the last time you kind of let it loose? And some people are today or recently. Mine was 2 nights ago. And it's one of the things about getting over your alexithymia is that when you're connected with your emotions, you cry easier than you have before. Not in a way where you completely lose control, but you're certainly much more connected with your emotions. Let's see here. Mike Gross said, when I learned that John Prine had died, I shed a tear for that one too. He was an amazing musician. And then what's your most treasured memory? What's the one thing that you just think back to and think, wow, that's a memory that just fills my entire body with upsides, if you will. For me, it is the moment my son was born and I first made real eye contact with him in his bassinet. That's a memory that stays big time in my life. Birth of my son, my wedding, kids. Love that. We met our first adopted child, Skip. Too many to name, Holly. That's wonderful. That's an amazing gift. So I am so grateful for your willingness to jump in and participate and do this. Yeah, Dave getting engaged in the Coliseum in Italy. That was pretty powerful. I remember those Facebook photos. You did that well. Traveled to Tennessee to surprise my sister after her son was born. So I would, encourage you. And if you want at the end of this, you want me to send you this slide deck, I'll send you the whole slide deck, not the PDF. I'll send you the actual PowerPoint slides, so you can have them and use them with other folks. And so you've got these questions to use with your friends and family. That's the last of the questions for now, but you can certainly keep chatting away in the chat room. I am really grateful for what you've put together here. One of the other lessons that comes from my buddy Tom Deck. This was years ago when he was at Pride Mark Paramedics in Boulder, Colorado. Company started by one of my super close friends, Jeff Forrester. And that principle of see something, say something. And it's used in our world to prevent terrorism. And if you see a package that's unattended, you should say something, or those kinds of things. And it's great from that perspective. But when it comes to connections and relationships, the key part of this is if you see something that seems off in somebody else, actually, saying something. And when Tom was the clinical and quality improvement manager at Taigman, he noticed one of his paramedics, the guy here on the right, Chris Galton, just, something seemed just a little bit off. And Chris was, normally a pretty squared away guy, and, his uniform was, was like his shirt tail was kind of untucked one day, and there was a little coffee stain on his shirt. And it didn't seem pressed, and just some other kind of affect things. And Tom said, "Hey, Chris, how you doing?" Then to see something, say something. And Chris said, "I'm fine." And Tom knew that fine in that context could stand for effed up, insecure, needy, and emotional. I'm fine. I'm fine. And most of us who've been in relationships have heard it said that way. And Tom took a breath and said, how are you really? Well, something doesn't seem fine to me. And he didn't like, jump in there like a surgeon trying to go for a tumor. But he gently connected, and it took a couple of days before Chris finally opened up to him and said, I'm just like burnt out. I am sick of taking care of drunks and running calls for people who shouldn't be calling 911. And I think I'm going to get out of medicine and get into law enforcement so that I could treat people the way they need to be treated when I run calls on them, was Chris's response. And that is not to disparage law enforcement in our country, but that was kind of his view at that moment. And Tom, stayed with him and stayed connected, and things really seemed to get better, and he seemed kind of square away. And then Tom moved off to another organization, and he lost track of Chris. And when the third edition of People Care was published, Chris sent Tom an email. He hadn't seen him in 10 years, and said, "Hey, you remember when you kind of poked me and prodded me and made me really talk about what was going on?" Well, that really turned things around for me. And not only have I stayed in medicine, but I've gone on, and I'm now an anesthesiologist and an intensivist. I still work one shift a month as a paramedic because I love being a paramedic. It's cooler than being a doc, but being a doc pays better. And I'm a medical director for a flight program. And I owe it all to you noticing something in me and reaching out and connecting. So I really, really encourage you to do that. And as we bring this to a close, I want to highlight one of the ways that my team at FirstWatch and I have tried to reach out and help folks. And we've got a system that is designed to help you build your resilience. And a core part of building your resilience is a whole section and batch of training on connection and collaboration. It's a pretty simple system that basically starts with a proactive risk assessment, where you basically do a 16-question research-validated assessment that gives you a look at your resilience from a comprehensive perspective. And then it drops you into a really cool, artificially intelligent-powered coaching system. Basically turns your smartphone into a resilience coach. And it gives you a personalized report on your own resilience, lets you know what your scores are in the different domains of resilience, including collaboration, which is the relationship one. And you'll see if you're interested in it, the URL for it is here at the bottom of the screen. And our strategy is basically to try to put a resilience coach in the pocket of everybody in the country. It allows you to scientifically assess your own resilience, learn skills every day to build your own resilience. And it allows you to chat anytime. Even though you're chatting with a computer, it sometimes feels like you're chatting with a person. And as you make progress over time, It allows you to track your progress. At this point in time, we've got over 200 skills built into it. We're on track to have close to 600 by the end of the year. And it's got some tools to help you get back on track quickly when you're feeling like it's a rough day. So if you're curious, by all means, check it out. And with that, I hope you stay cool and calm and connected with the folks in your world. Please feel free to text me or email me anytime with questions. If you want this slide deck, I'm happy to share it with you. If you're interested in any of the science associated with this stuff, let me know. And if any of you have got questions that you want to ask, you can raise a hand here, and I'm happy to unmute you. There's Holly has got her hand up. Holly, you're unmuted. Welcome.
Oh, sorry. For some reason, I actually don't have a question. I didn't realize I had my hand up. Sorry about that.
No worries. All good. It's good to have you here with us today. Thank you. All right. Anybody else want to raise their hand and be unmuted to speak verbally? Looking at the list and not seeing any. We really appreciate all of you and your participation today. This session is brought to you by the team at Associates, Pinnacle, FirstWatch, and sponsored by Ninth Brain. Pinnacle is going to be in August, a year from now, August 2021. Is that right, Anthony? Did I get the date right?
That's correct, Mike. August 9 through 13 of 2021.
Where's it going to be?
It's going to be at the JW Marriott in Phoenix, Arizona. Perfect.
Thank you so much for your sponsorship of this and helping make this happen. Please, anybody else who's got anything else to say, type it in the chat box, and otherwise, stay safe and stay happy, and we'll talk to you on the next one. Thank you.
Wow, that was powerful stuff, Mike. This was some really great information, and what a fantastic way for you to remind us to be taking care of ourselves and taking care of others. Quality of relationships in life is certainly what it's all about. You know, our nervous systems are certainly on high alert right now, and your words of wisdom are certainly ones for all of us to remember and to practice. Thank you so much for sharing your time and knowledge with us all today. And by the way, that alexithymia, I hope that word comes up on Words with Friends soon, because I'm going to rock it that day.
Perfect, my friend.
I hope that everybody else enjoyed this webinar as much as I did. And thank you to our strategic partners, FirstWatch, for sponsoring this session, for Mike for a stellar presentation. Please be sure to reach out to Mike, Todd, or any of the other great folks at FirstWatch for more information on resilience and the other great services that they offer. And thank you to our education partner, Ninth Brain, for sponsoring this session with us today. And thank you to all of you for joining us. As I said at the beginning of today's session, we've expanded the Pinnacle webinar series, and there'll be more to come each month from now until we're together again in 2021. So please watch your email or follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter for more information about what's coming in the Pinnacle webinar series. Speaking of Pinnacle, you can go to the website on the screen, pinnacle-ems.com, for any information about all things Pinnacle related. On behalf of FirstWatch, Ninth Brain, and all of us at Fitch & Associates, thank you all for everything you're doing out there on the front lines to make this world a better place. Please continue to be safe and well. This concludes today's session.